Well, it's been a long 24 hours, has it not? Um, it's one of those kind of shows. I was prepared and still am intending to do a show highlighting the cost of what's taking place overseas versus the kind of programs that we're always told by both political parties that we are unable to afford here in the States. And I also wanted to highlight that it seems like one of the last kinds of bigotry that's still accepted in this country is Islamophobic and anti-Muslim bigotry. I am intending to do both of those segments still, but obviously that's been a bit muted given the acts of violence that have taken place over the course of the last 24 hours. And I have to say, I realize I swim in this soup every single day. My life, in terms of how I ingest news, is not the same as the average person's life in that regard. But there is something surreal about not being away from a screen for 30 minutes. Like I leave from work, I typically will go and grab a bite, whether it be at a restaurant or something to bring back to my apartment right after I get out of work. And then I come home, I eat, and I kind of set up shop for the next day. It's not a lengthy process. You know what I mean? It's not like we're in a huge town. I live 5 minutes away from the station. It's not a super long commute for me to be able to get back to the apartment right now. And the number of times that I have come home, I've made my way home after a short period of time of not being entrenched in the news 24/7 to only find out that something horrific has taken place over the course of the last couple of minutes is happening more frequently than I would like to admit, to be honest with you here. I kind of told the story in jest yesterday, but it is a true story that I took one Saturday to not be surrounded by screens. And when I came back to screen life, it turned out that we had started a full-blown conflict with Iran that it looks like has taken the lives of even more armed service individuals from this country, on top of the countless amount of damage that we've done in the country of Iran, as well as to our American economy in a way that seems so unthought out that it's almost embarrassing. But more on that later. I need to stay focused. There were two acts of violence that were perpetrated yesterday, both against the Jewish community. And this isn't even the first time. I'll be honest, there's been a couple of different acts of violence that have been engaged in by individuals that claim sympathies for ISIS. And when I see those kind of things happen, I start to get nervous because I know immediately MAGA is going to kick into gear about like this is indicative of the entire Muslim population. And maybe we should be awful to all these people. And sure enough, I mean, that absolutely started online and in on certain news networks. You'll never guess which one. But I also know that the Democratic Party is not that far removed from being able to do that either. And we're going to be focusing on that a little bit throughout the show today as well. I did a program yesterday talking about how violence begets more violence. I made some coy comment about an eye for an eye. I'm pretty sure that was mentioned in a very old book. I said something to that effect yesterday before either of these things happened. There was an attack on a synagogue. And for those of you that are newer to the show, I am from Pittsburgh. I had been working in the media industry for all of 2 months when the Tree of Life shooting happened in Pittsburgh. And I'm sure most of you listening are probably familiar with that one. Back in the spring of 2018, a lunatic, an anti-Semite, went into a synagogue in a neighborhood close to where I was living before I moved out here and took the lives of 9 Jewish individuals in an obvious act of hate. A synagogue was attacked yesterday in Michigan, and it is being portrayed as an act of hate again, which it's pretty difficult to avoid addressing it as anything else other than that, right? It was an attack done by somebody specifically because they were targeting the Jewish population, specifically Jewish children, in an effort to inflict as most possible damage as possible. Didn't seem like this individual had the intention to get out of this out of this matter alive, to be perfectly frank. I haven't heard that anywhere, but just given the nature of what took place, driving a vehicle through the building, having it rigged to set on fire, potentially explode, shooting guns out of the windows, I don't think that there was an escape that was part of that conversation. I'm not going to say that anything justifies this. And I'm really picking my words carefully here. Nothing justifies this. This is an act of hate, and most importantly, I'm going to lean into the war that is taking place and the actions of Israel in a moment here. But it is important for me to say, before I say anything else about this, that the actions of Jewish people in America are in no way indicative of the actions of, that the government in Israel is doing. For all we know, that I mean, statistically speaking, there obviously are people that endorse what's taking place right now in Lebanon, in Gaza, and in Iran, and in several other instances around the Middle East. And that is absolutely their American right to hold those opinions. But inflicting violence on people that have nothing to do with the decisions being made obviously is only going to create more hatred, more bigotry, more of a tendency for these kind of things to happen in the future. To be perfectly frank, it's the exact same stuff that I have been saying about Israel's actions in Gaza post October 7th and pre October 7th. Trying to kill children or successfully killing children in the IDF's circumstance in Gaza will not address the issues that you see in our current socio-economic foreign policy situation that we have in the Middle East right now. The man who rammed his truck into the Michigan synagogue was named Ayman Ghazala. And that's according to a source familiar with the situation. I am not sitting here saying that no media has said this. I saw it first reported by Dropsite News. I did hear it mentioned one time on CNN during the coverage of it, but by and large, this part of the conversation is being left out. I am not saying that what I'm about to say justifies violence or that it is okay to do these kind of things here. But Ghazala posted photos overnight of his family members, including 2 young children and 2 adults who were killed in a recent Israeli attack in the town of Masgara, Lebanon. It is currently still a developing story, as per Ryan Grimm of Dropsite News. And if you're not familiar with Dropsite News, in my opinion, it is one of the most trustworthy sources in terms of foreign policy coverage of what's going on. Yesterday during my program, it was basically a throwaway line. I didn't do an entire segment on it. I just mentioned that it happened and moved on. But I said throughout the course, I believe it was Wednesday night going into Thursday, possibly Tuesday night going into Wednesday, I mentioned that there had been an attack in Lebanon by Israel where 84 children were killed. And I said that was twice as many people or children that were killed on October 7th. And yet it wasn't a blip on the radar in American media, in Israeli media. It wasn't talked about in the way that had the exact same violence been perpetrated against Israel or against America, the way that we would have talked about it. As we famously know, we blew up a school filled with 7 to 12-year-olds, and I'm not ready to get in my Democrat bashing mode yet, but I would like to highlight that school and those children's deaths have already been talked about a whole hell of a lot more than the children who were getting massacred by Israel in Gaza for the better part of a year and a half while the Biden administration continued funneling weapons and money into Israel. So it goes to show you, had Kamala Harris won the presidency, how that school bombing may have been portrayed by the liberal media establishment, and of course, how it probably would be inverted by Fox News right now. I am not saying that this individual losing the children in his life, that he was coming to America to work, to send money back to his family, justifies the actions that were taken. Most certainly, the children at the synagogue in Michigan had nothing to do with what took place with the tragic loss of life in this person's family. But I can't even begin to speculate how I would behave as a person if everyone in my life had been taken away from me like that in a matter of wanton violence that in a lot of ways I'm struggling to even define why it happened. Why is Israel doing what they're doing in Lebanon versus everywhere else? They've been bombing that locale since well before this Iran war broke out, and it's been fairly consistent. There's even been occupying forces in part of Lebanon. Why is that happening? And then it gets turned around, and this stupid act of violence is portrayed as just another example in the growing epidemic of anti-Semitism in this country. And I'm here to tell you, I don't know a single thing about what this person thought about the Jewish population before this took place. Given the historical tendencies of the region, I'm sure he wasn't particularly thrilled, but it doesn't seem, at least in preliminary, reporting that there was some kind of history of this kind of behavior. This seems like the actions of a very sad individual who snapped after finding out about the loss of a lot of the people in his family, including the youngest members of it, brought about by a regime that, even across the political spectrum, it seems pretty easy to condemn the IDF, to condemn the Israeli government, while saying that Israel has a right to exist, that the people don't deserve to be in any kind of harm's way, and especially the Jewish population in America that has no control over what's happening most certainly doesn't belong in any kind of dangerous position right now. But it's not being portrayed that way in the media. This part of the conversation is just as important as the fact that he was clearly targeting a Jewish population. But I would argue, while targeting a group of Jewish people specifically because they're Jewish is labeled as anti-Semitism, I'm not a fool. I understand that premise. It doesn't change the fact that very clearly there were extenuating circumstances that pushed this individual to that moment. To label it as ISIS sympathies, to label it as terrorism, to label it as simply anti-Semitism without mentioning this very crucial part of the conversation. And again, I can't watch all media at all times. I'm not going to speak and say that it is never being brought up, but it seems pretty conspicuous that this part of the story is being left out, because if there's one thing I know, and this is especially certain about MAGA, when there's a story online about some individual that murders a child and somehow finds a loophole to get out of it or gets released from jail, and then the father goes and takes the life of the person who killed their child, very rarely is somebody in the comments saying, oh, I don't know why that guy couldn't keep his cool. And more often than not, there's people saying, like, I would have done the same thing in that moment. I'm not justifying that action for a second, but I'm saying there's a human element to this that cannot be avoided. And it's being dressed up as some kind of flagrant anti-Semitism. And I can't help but feel like there's going to be an effort to use the violence of yesterday to help sell the war to people that maybe are on the fence about what's going on right now. And while leaving that very important claim out of the conversation, the fact, I should say, out of the conversation, you are most certainly leaving some very important information out that would help people to understand exactly why we saw what happened yesterday happen. The shooting in Virginia is not quite as obvious as that one. One person ended up losing their life in that one. This person also expressed sympathies for ISIS, had been in custody, and had been released in December of 24. I don't know the specifics of how they ultimately ended up coming to that decision. Disgusting act of violence. We have disgusting acts of violence every day in this country. We don't know if there's any relation between the two attacks yet or not, and anybody trying to tell you they know otherwise is misleading you. There isn't any information about what's going on from that front. It's been a pretty calm reaction to what has taken place since then, and I am thankful for that. But I do see it running up the flagpole. I see the machinations in motion. I see the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, already coming out labeling this as blatant anti-Semitism, and I just think it's impossible to separate this story from the actions taken by the Israeli government, specifically impacting this individual. We could have another conversation entirely if this were somebody that just empathized with Iran, that empathized with Lebanon, that empathized with Gaza. I still understand the nature of it, but it's a different conversation. When you lose essentially the rest of your family to the conversation, to the acts of this government, none of us know how we would feel or how we'd react in that moment. I'd like to think most of us wouldn't try to take it out on a group of children, and this individual is disgusting for trying to do that. And I think it only makes the cause for which he ended up dying harder to prove, because there's going to be a lot of people that run this up the flagpole. Before any of this violence took place, I was intending to do a segment about Tommy Tuberville saying the enemy is within the gates, talking about Zohran Mamdani as the mayor of New York City. I was going to highlight Randy Fine of Florida and the Islamophobic comments that he was making about Muslims in America, because to me, it seems pretty clear that you're not going to be able to sell this war to any Americans based on wanting to bail out Israel. But it seems like it is a calculation of the Republican right that you can sell this war to the MAGA right by making it about anti-Muslim rhetoric. And it seems, unfortunately, like over the course of the last 48 hours, that they're trying that strategy, and more importantly, it's working. And then when actions like this, when events like this end up happening, it just provides more fuel, more fodder for the bigots within the Republican Party to be able to highlight this and say, see, these people can't live in civilized society, even though they were prepared to make those tweets even before the actions took place. The actions of a handful of individuals, as I oftentimes highlight on this show, are not indicative of the actions of an overall group of people. You'll never get me to commit to anything differently than that. Very sad day yesterday, though, and it's going to take time for us to move past it, that's for sure. And until we get all of the information, until we have a media infrastructure that's willing to always include every bit of the story, because again, wouldn't justify the actions, but I think there would be a lot of people in America today if every time you heard about the story, you also heard about what took place, what happened to this person's family. You don't think that we just created dozens of more terrorists in Iran by murdering over 100 children aged 7 to 12? You don't think that that's not going to be propaganda in their country for them to come and hate us, and then the people that control our military industrial complex in this country are licking their chops to try and convince the dumbest Americans that these people hate us for our freedoms, or these people hate us because of some other misguided, because of their religion, because of whatever the situation is, instead of the fact that we just murdered their children. They're obviously very mad about it, because I'd like to think that murdering children is kind of a ubiquitous thing that we should all condemn. Fortunately, I have enough evidence with a Democrat in power of the White House as well as a Republican in power of the White House to know that we have political parties that will work overtime to make sure that they can justify whatever violent action took place. I saw Tammy Baldwin, Landon Moore, actually, if you guys didn't notice, if you listen on YouTube or on the app or anywhere else, you don't hear the newscasts. But Landon Moore wasn't here for the 10 o'clock coverage because Tammy Baldwin was in the region making a statement about the war in Iran, and she condemned the violence that was going on there. I didn't hear any of those condemnations when hundreds of children were dying daily in Gaza, when Democrats had the power to stop it from happening. But you hear that school mentioned every single day since it took place, and rightfully so. It's a lot to take in, and it's a sad day to do this for a living. It's a sad day to be an American when you watch what happened, and I have to believe it's a sad day to be a Jewish American, because you realize that there are people that are going to externalize their hate for what the Israeli government is doing in attacks on people here in America. And this show will not stand for anti-Semitism of any kind. It shouldn't be a bold statement to say anything like that. But we also have to have this kind of conversation in good faith. And I don't believe, at least in Michigan, that this was an act out of hatred specifically for a group of people just for hate's sake. Virginia seems a little bit more clear-cut that that might be the case, but not so much in Michigan. And not reporting it on it that way, not talking about it that way, not highlighting what this person went through days before making the decision. I think that there's ulterior motives behind putting that narrative out there, personally. Larry says Ron Johnson accepted 1.6 million. Tammy Baldwin has accepted 2.9 million from the AIPAC. Anna asks, how is accepting political money from a foreign identity not explicitly anti-American and illegal? Frank says, come on, Anna, it's a tale as old as time and it's been happening forever. That's oftentimes the refrain, and I refuse to accept that as an answer personally. The fact that it's the way that it happened doesn't mean that it's the way it always has to happen. But to answer the previous comment about AIPAC, what sticks out to me about AIPAC is during the Russia gate of 2016, that's what was initially implied. What The Trump administration, what the Trump campaign in 2016 was accused of doing, is what AIPAC does every 2 years, and soon to be, it seems like what big tech ends up doing every 2 years, because there's like $165 million, I think, has been poured into 2026 to get pro AI candidates in Congress, regardless of any other beliefs that they may have. So we can kind of throw them in the mix as well. But in terms of, at least that's American. But yes, I'm right there with you. These guys are accepting this money, and it's pretty flagrant to me how egregious it is, how obvious it is that you get the money and then immediately you're in favor of what's happening. I've been playing audio of Lindsey Graham. Ted Cruz walked out of a Christian event yesterday because people were booing him because he said it's important that we funnel our never-ending support dollars and livelihoods to Israel, and in a country where people are struggling to exist right now. No one's buying this. I had the professors on Wednesday. They said if we get good outcomes from this war, people's opinions of it will flip. It'll turn on a dime. People will begin to justify what's happening. They'll be on board with it. I'm here to tell you right now, nobody that can't get into a house is going to support this war, regardless of what ends up coming from it. Nobody cares. I'm promising you right now, nobody cares. Our text lines are blowing up here. Let's see what we got. This morning, this is from Jerry. This morning, I heard two news summaries, CBS and NPR. Both reported in their headlines he lost family members, Israeli attacks in southern Lebanon. Also, the Washington Post. Suspect in synagogue crash had lost family in his Israeli attack on Lebanon as of 5 minutes ago. So these stories, what's interesting is, Jerry, is it's becoming more prevalent today. And I wonder if independent media didn't exist, because the first place I saw it was Drop Site News. And again, they do phenomenal reporting and put the legwork in to demand that kind of trust. It's like when I see something reported in Lever News. If I see something reported in Sky News, I'm like, okay, let me get 3 or 4 more sources. If I see something in Haaretz or the Israeli Times, I'm like, okay, let me get a couple more sources before I do anything with this. I do that with everything, but there are certain institutions that I'm like, okay, if they're saying this, I'm going to get a second source, but I'd like to find out. I saw Drop Site reporting this at 4 p.m. yesterday, and it took until a little after 7 before I heard the first mention of it in any kind of nationalized media. And like I said, I appreciate you providing me the headlines and that's great work, and you help make this show more complete, and I appreciate that. But I oftentimes do wonder, it's the double-edged sword of social media. It's both obnoxious, it's a purveyor of fake news and fabricated news, but it also has some real stuff in there. And if you're willing to work for it, if you're willing to look for it, they really do good reporting. And I wonder, had that not been made public in the way that it had been, how many of us would know it and how many would be reporting on it in a meaningful way? It's definitely some food for thought. Ben says, Allah Akbar shouted in America, get them out of here. Well, he's dead, so no need to worry about it. Hate breeds hate, and the Republicans are masters of that, comes from one texter here. I mean, the people in Congress who are saying the stuff about Muslims right now are disgusting. And for those of you newer to the show, I joke, it's like my brother and I knew what woke was before being woke even existed. But one of the first friends I made in kindergarten was a Chinese kid that didn't speak English, but he was really good at Super Nintendo. So we had a really good relationship early on. The first friend my brother made when he started kindergarten was a Saudi Arabian kid. Their parents and my parents ended up becoming great friends. And I was there. We used to go on vacation together. We used to go out and about all over the town that I grew up in. The day 9/11 happened, the only time we ever hung out was when we would go to one another's houses, because they didn't want to go out in public anymore because the anti-Muslim hate had grown so large. And that was, to be honest with you guys, that was borne out by both parties in 2001, given the fact that there was a terrorist attack on our home soil. But again, the 12-year-old kid and his family that were living here had absolutely nothing to do with any of that. They still do live here. They're still a part of my life. When I got this job, he sent me a congratulations letter here in Wisconsin. He's an awesome dude, and we're lucky to have him in this country. So, yeah, I have a soft spot for this kind of stuff, and I don't tolerate any kind of the hatred towards that population, especially here in America, just like I don't tolerate any hatred towards the Jewish population. It's not particularly difficult to not be a jerk, but the Republican Party knows that they can gin up their population bringing this kind of hatred towards that population, because bringing some kind of familiarity towards Israel and wanting to support them isn't resonating. You look at the polling data, nobody cares. Build us freaking houses and fix our health care. But as soon as you mention the, aren't they Muslim? Then all of a sudden people get frustrated about it. DSL says your comparison shows the difference. A heavy-hearted person going after the victim is going after random people with nothing to do with it. Now those random victims' family members could do the same thing back, and the cycle will never end. You're exactly right. I've already seen it online, DSL. There's people, because again, I want to be very careful to highlight that I am not condoning what took place or using this as an example for why this is the why this took place and we all have to accept it. But the same population of people, Ryan Grimm posted this information on his Twitter account, and all the mentions afterward are from people saying, oh, so it was justified? You're saying this is okay? Which is never what he said. But the lack of irony that they realize is that it's the exact same justification that they were using for killing children in Gaza. It's cyclical in nature until we call it out for what it is. And when you have some of the loudest voices in media trying to tell you that this was in the name of hate for a population and no other reason, it is quite literally disingenuous. Putting headlines out there now, a little bit after the fact, is going to do a little bit of help to reverse it. I'm willing to bet you right now it has never been mentioned on Fox News. And if someone has a screenshot to prove me wrong, I welcome that. I do not have evidence of that. But based on the way the Republicans in Congress are reacting, based on what I've seen in online right-wing media, I am not seeing any type of honest or true coverage in what's going on there. So if someone can prove me wrong, I ask that you do that, please, because I absolutely will read that on the air. But your attitude towards this is exactly right, DSL. I got one here. It says, maybe NPR is too mainstream for you, but they did report on the air this morning about the synagogue attacker's family. Yes, that's Jerry said as well. I appreciate the comment there. And again, it doesn't matter if it's mainstream. It matters if it's honest. I use mainstream sources on this program all the time. I'm not against that idea. But I also recognize that in a world where social media didn't exist, there would have been a whole hell of a lot more for support for Israel after October 7th, because the only place where it was showing what exactly was happening in Gaza post October 7th was in those independent sources. And the mainstream sources bent over backwards to ignore the reality until it was too late. And not until it was too late, until it was impossible to ignore it otherwise. At least that was my opinion of it. Ernie asks, since this was our country's mistake, couldn't we be held responsible? I mean, we absolutely are held responsible for the lives, but you're talking about the bombing of the school in Iran. It's easy to get confused, Ernie, because so many children are being murdered in the name of a war that nobody can really describe why it's happening. But you're talking about the bombing of a school where 170-ish children ended up getting bombed. This was in Lebanon that I'm talking about, where attacks overnight took the lives of 84 children. And that is where this individual, that was explicitly done by Israel. That had nothing to do with the American government, other than, the facilitation of our weapons, money, and support, but not the actual act of it. KG says, I work with lots of Muslim people. They're not the ones who worry me. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm absolutely there with you. It's disgusting to watch this kind of stuff happen. Okay, I see I have a couple of calls piling up here, but I am late to break, so I'm going to put you guys all on hold, and we will get you on the other side of the break. Anybody else wants to chime in? 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. That's a call or text line. We've got two callers lined up. The YouTube page is up as well, and it's active there on the chat too. Go ahead and hit that up. It's just at Ben Cominos, all one word with the @ sign. if you guys are interested in watching the show behind the scenes here. So we'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. You know, probably the saddest part about everything that's happening right here from my perspective is not that long ago, I remember when I was nervous about doing segments like this, not knowing if I was going to be able to convey the message the right way, say the right things, do the right things. And it's happening so prevalently these days that I don't really have that feeling anymore. And I realize that comes with doing any job for a longer period of time, but this isn't something that I want to get used to be perfectly frank. It's a strange sensation, to say the least, that how prevalent this is becoming in this country, and the way it's covered, the way it's discussed, the way it's talked about. I've got right-wing talking points in my text line that I'm just straight up going to ignore or not read because it actually breaks my brain to read them. Madness, just absolute madness. I see the YouTube text lines piling up here, and it's everywhere. Trying my best to juggle all these comments, guys, but we'll do callers because they've been waiting for a while. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hi, Ben. Cynthia in Florida. I'll talk about Hezbollah last, but anytime that things like this happen, I always wonder who instigated it, who was behind it. Because I remember when Mike Pompeo wanted Julian Assange assassinated because he came out in WikiLeaks and he talked about these intelligence agencies who have created these terrorist groups to use as proxies.
Sure.
I am furious that I blame these crazy Zionists and these Christian fundamentalists for goading all of these people into supporting these kinds of regime change wars. But, you know, when I read the Israeli press this morning, they are calling this man a member of Hezbollah. Everybody's Hezbollah. Everybody's Hamas. Hezbollah didn't exist until 1982. These are people that had to flee from their home in Palestine to live in Lebanon. Israel used the Christian phalanges to massacre up to 3,500 people. That's when Hezbollah came into being. And it was the Shaber and Shatila massacre. And now what's happening, Israel is stealing more land in Lebanon because of this Greater Israel Project, or something I told you about that I read in the 80s. It was called the Oded-Ynon, OdedYnon plan. They have been planning this for decades. And we are all caught up in this madness.
Yeah, that's... I don't even have anything to add to that, Cynthia. I think you laid out the history of things there pretty succinctly, and that's exactly right. We're caught up in it. We're told we have to invest more in defense in order to keep it under wraps, and that's why we have to accept degradation in other parts of our society. It's disgusting to watch happen. Go ahead, yeah.
And yesterday, I was kind of cut off when I was trying to tell you, Donald Trump got rid of the Department of Homeland Security that was to investigate internal lone wolf terrorist attacks. He did that at the end of 2025. This man loves chaos. He and his Epstein billionaire warmongers want chaos. They want us under attack. They want us angry.
Yeah.
He did that.
You might be right. Hey, I appreciate the call, Cynthia. And she's right with a lot of what she's laying out there right now. I mean, a lot of these times, Julian Assange was labeled as a terrorist because he had the audacity to do journalism, which is kind of remarkable when you really stop and think about that for a second. By the way, shout out to one person on the YouTube text line who says this is the closest thing to mainstream media that they listens to Wajahat Ali, Daniel Moody, Allison Gill, Aaron Parnas, so many others. So that's kind of why I chose to do radio instead of now I'm more on the internet than I've ever been. So I am kind of becoming part of a sea of voices that do this kind of thing. But I don't think there's a lot of people in talk radio doing this, which is why I wanted to do it in this venue, because there's 1,600-ish talk radio stations in America. 1,500 of them are right-wing, far right-wing nonsense. And so I kind of was hoping to pierce through the noise. Seems like we are doing it slowly but surely, until somebody texts into my text line about Democrats and abortion, and then I have to eye roll and be like, maybe I should just scream into an Altoid container and throw it off a cliff. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Yeah, good morning, Ben. It's Gary calling. Say, the other day I was looking up, what things were like in Iran before 1979. I had a friend of mine. He was stationed there in the army in Iran in the middle 70s. And I was wondering, what was the feeling? And I kind of got the idea that, the Shah was doing his thing. Oil revenue was flowing in, and the people had some acceptance of Western ideals, but there was an eruption to go back to the old ways. And, the things that eventually got rid of them were inflation, corruption, and political repression. And, that's the same under Khomeini, and it's kind of the same as what we're having here in our country. Probably 85% of the world is living under those conditions of whether it's Russia or Ukraine or Argentina or whatever, Venezuela, Cuba. Inflation, corruption, and political repression, and those are the seeds that spark change. But sometimes it takes a while for things to actually bubble up from the.
I think you're absolutely right in your assessment of that as well, Gary. And I've made the comparison. I'm not saying they are apples to apples before anybody gets upset with me, but in Gaza, 60% of people are struggling to figure out. There were people that would go days without eating. That's how Hamas is created. When there's a blockade of your food, when there is no access to the ability to improve yourself or to get out of a trash situation you're in, and you can kind of scapegoat, and oftentimes in Gaza's instance, it's relevant. You can point to a certain group as preventing you from being able to do better and grow more. It's just like in January of 21. How does January 6th happen? Because people are struggling. Now, MAGA struggles in realizing that Donald Trump is not the answer to their problems, just as Joe Biden isn't the answer to the problems. And when your back is against the wall, when you end up thinking that there's no recourse in order to improve your life, that's when all of a sudden you find yourself in a position where you act out like that. You storm a Capitol, start chanting, "Hang the vice president." It's not a particularly complicated process there, and it seems like no matter what place you're looking at, that's where it ultimately boils down to. Don't think that America isn't above becoming that. As we progress more and more into this larger and larger percentage of us have no savings and are not making enough money to enjoy life. Why do you think there's a race to a surveillance state? It's not to make your lives better. It's to keep you in line when you get ready to act out. Just remember that. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
How you doing, Ben?
Hey, Jim, what's up?
Ben, I want to compliment you for all the time we've been listening to you. You always talk in an intelligent tone of voice. You never talk down or derogatory to anybody, left or right. And I'm just so disgusted with our president on the news this morning talking about deranged scumbags or whatever it was. But anyway, Ben, keep up the good work and get your snow brushes ready. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that. I try. Sometimes I lose my cool a little bit. I mean, I am Mediterranean, so we have that half in there. I'll tell you what. I have a lot more that I want to say about this, but I do want to squeeze in one more short break before the top of the hour, because I don't want to do that long break thing that I do. But the text line and the YouTube chat are both popping off a little bit here, so I got to learn how to focus on the show a little bit better here too. We're getting there. All right, I'll tell you what, quick break. We'll finish up this conversation. I do have other things that I want to talk about today, but obviously I let the callers and listeners dictate the show. So if anybody else has any thoughts on the matter, 920-281-1150. We have to squeeze in a break here though beforehand. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. You're listening to Outside the Box. So Ben Cominos, you're on WHBY and Political Voices Network. All right, and we're back. Outside the Box. Ben Cominos, WHBY, Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. If you're just joining us, we wrapped up the entire first hour essentially talking about the violence that had taken place in this country over the past 24 hours, realistically less than, probably closer to 18 hours or so. The way it's covered, the way it's talked about, the aftermath of what's coming, and then just a little bit about the attitudes towards the violence in general. And now we're going to pivot into a different kind of conversation here. I see everyone jerking me around in the YouTube channel text a little bit here, and that's because I kind of let them know coming up next, I'm going to try something for my first time here, but I posted a picture available on my socials of two things, because there's a lot of 90s nostalgia online right now, and I feel like that's common. Like anytime something becomes 20 to 30 years old, there's a nostalgia for what it is. It's the reason why that 70s show was a thing 20 years ago, right? So it would stand to reason that 90s nostalgia comes about now. What I'm realizing, though, is there's probably a couple of different reasons for why that is. So I'm going to try and share the screen on the video feed here. It looks like that's not going to work, actually. That's fine. But the long and short of it is there's a Macaulay Culkin-style character sitting next to the beefy 5-layer burrito at Taco Bell, and it's 89 cents to buy it. And the kid, he's looking 90s as hell. He's got that blonde hair. He's got the gold chain, red shirt. And then it shows you the beefy 5-layer burrito today, and it's $5.36. That's a 6 times plus. It's more than a 6 times increase on what the cost of this burrito was. You don't get more. It's not bigger. It's just that's how much inflation has hit us over the last 30 years. Other shoe dropping time. Actually, this isn't a video from the 90s because the beefy 5-layer burrito was not invented until 2009. This is to show you that over the course of 17 years, the cost of this particular food item has become more than 6 times expensive. You know what else happened in 2009? It was the last time the minimum wage was increased. How many of you guys have noticed a 6 times increase in what you're taking home every single week? What's that? The answer is none of you. Okay, good. That's what I thought the answer was. Of course, none of you have seen that much. We'd all be incredibly rich people if that were the case. There is a real conversation to be had about the cost of living. There is a real conversation to be had about the government's role in reining in cost of living. But this is what we're dealing with here. Obviously, MAGA doesn't mean business. They're the pro-billionaire party. They want to cut taxes for billionaires, cut access to social programs, and literally nothing else, and then just pretend that prices are getting lower. Trumponomics is really working for them. Here's the crazy part, though. I'm old enough to remember watching the mayoral race in New York, and there were claims about a free bus program in New York City, right? We're going to make the buses free so that everybody can ride them to get where they need to go, and they do not need to spend such large sums of their hard-earned money on the process of getting to and from work, because cars are so expensive, and to be frank, navigating New York City in general is not a particularly exciting prospect for a lot of people if you've ever lived or even been there once. You probably know that that's the case. And what did everybody say when he proposed free buses for the people of New York? Well, how are you going to pay for it? What are you going to do? You're going to raise taxes on everybody in order to be able to pay for it? Money doesn't grow on trees. These progressives just don't understand how the economy works. 2 days of Donald Trump's war of choice in Iran would fund 8.5 years of Mamdani's bus plan. So the thing that politicians, Democrats included, Blue MAGA Dems included, the bus program that people claim was too expensive, would have required tax increases, was out of the question in terms of being able to fund it. Turns out 2 days of blowing up schools and making life miserable in the Middle East and creating thousands of new terrorist cells as a result of our and Israel's actions in the Middle East. That is not a question about where we're going to find the money. But it turns out that Mamdani is a pie-in-the-sky socialist who has no idea how government really works. Are you starting to see the games that are being played yet? I really hope that you understand that. 8 weeks of paid leave for every new parent in 2025 would cost this country $10 billion. We spent $3 billion more than that in the first week of war in Iran. Covering community college tuition for every student that is currently enrolled in college, in a community college, would cost $10.9 billion for the year. We spent that in the first week of blowing up school children in Iran. Are you starting to catch on yet to the games that are being played yet? We're kicking people off healthcare. We're kicking people off SNAP. We already have a cost of living crisis that precedes COVID that was only exacerbated by COVID without anybody having any interest to try and address the cost of what's going on. We have watched the cost of the 5-layer bean burrito at Taco Bell, something you know I eat so often. I've definitely had a taco before. It was a 5-layer bean burrito go up by more than 6 times since 2009. You know who had control of the government since 2009? Everybody. Everybody had control. A full Democratic control government, a full Republican control government, and a mixed bag. And you know what we're being told? It's in our heads that corporate greed isn't real, that there's nothing the government can do about it, despite the fact that there are obviously things that the government can do about it. And it's being highlighted more and more with every single passing day that we watch these stories can continue to pile up. What is this? Example 9,278 of me showing you something, what it cost 10 years, and showing you what it costs today, and highlighting that is not the normal path of progression that should be happening in a place where antitrust is enforced and competition is vibrant. Meanwhile, you're going to watch oil prices go up. And I'm willing to bet similar to what took place after COVID and similar to what took place after the war in Ukraine started, you're going to see oil and gas companies jack their prices up even further beyond the level that they have to jack their prices up based on where the prices go. Here is the statement that Donald Trump made that MAGA Republicans are train seal clapping for, of course, because God forbid you question your dear leader. Let me pretend Kamala Harris said this for some of you in the audience. The United States is the largest oil producer in the world by far. So when oil prices go up, we make a lot of money. But of far greater interest and importance to me as president is stopping an evil empire, Iran, from having a nuclear weapon and destroying the Middle East and indeed the world. So I won't ever let that happen. Thank you for your attention on this matter. Now, Kamala Harris probably wouldn't have said something so stupid at the end of that because even that cackling crazy person isn't as dumb as this guy is. But, so ExxonMobil and BP making infinity profits. Is that America being great again? When do I feel great again, MAGA? Because something tells me you wouldn't accept this coming from a Democrat. This might actually be the dumbest thing that this man has said in his life. And I don't know if the things this guy has said, but he says some dumb crap. And this might be the dumbest thing I've ever heard somebody say that is currently sitting in the White House. The only people that are going to benefit from this are the oil companies. You, MAGA, you, Blue MAGA, you, progressives, will be paying more at the pump. Obviously, you will be paying more at the pump. Donald Trump is actually giving the game away here because when he says we, he means him and his oil CEO and oil tycoon friends, leaving the rest of us in a lurch. The problem with MAGA is they believe that Donald Trump hates liberals and hates the wokeness in America without realizing that he also hates you too. And it's becoming more and more flagrant with every passing day. But I understand the sunk cost fallacy. You've already lost $600 at the blackjack table, so you might as well bet $600 on the next hand in order to try and make those losses back. Whoops, now I'm down $1,200. I understand the concept of the sunk cost fallacy and how that plays into the Trump presidency. And me mocking this guy as a moron and anybody still believing in what this guy has to say is a moron probably isn't going to help you come around and see the light anytime soon. And I understand that, but there comes a level. I do have my parents in me, and I can only suffer idiocy for so long before I have to be like, okay, I can't hold your hand through this anymore. This guy's stupid. You're going to pay more. And weren't you guys just complaining for the last 4 years about the lack of movement on the cost of living crisis brought about by Joe Biden that was largely blocked by, you'll never guess which Republican Party or which political party? Sorry, gave the answer away. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, I have two things.
Yeah.
First of all, you're not mentioning in this what you're talking about with the oil companies, that the fact that we are still subsidizing them to the tune of billions of dollars.
Is that Israel
and
you're talking about?
Two, I'm sorry?
Who are we subsidizing to the tune of billions? The oil and gas companies or Israel? Because either one fits.
The fossil fuel industry.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
You know, like it's not enough that they're making billions raping us over the coals, but, you know, we subsidize them on top of it all. And number two is you're talking about all, you know, the prices of everything going up. When was the last time our minimum wage went up?
2009, when the 5-layer beefy burrito was invented. Longest tenure ever since the minimum wage was created. It's the longest stretch of no increase to the minimum wage since it was invented.
Yep.
It's absolute madness, and I appreciate the call, Cindy. Yeah, and she's exactly right. You watch all these costs go up, and it's really not commensurate. I've highlighted it before. If you look at the productivity of the American worker from 1900 until today, from 1900 until 1980, productivity and wages were unison. They moved in a linear fashion. Then St. Reagan came along, cut taxes for billionaires, as did Bush Sr., Bush Jr., Trump 1, and Trump 2. And that's when you see the productivity continue going on the same linear path that had been happening before, but wages have absolutely stagnated. And so you see these cost of living crises, and then Joe Biden would be like, I have a bill that's going to issue a windfall tax on the oil and gas company. You know who blocked it? Clap along with me, everyone. Every single Republican in the House and Senate blocked any kind of measure in order to implement a higher tax on the oil and gas companies that were gouging us at the pump, both after COVID and after the war in Ukraine. Now you have Donald Trump coming along, making no effort to rein it in. Independent studies are already saying if the war started today, the soonest we would see oil and gas prices return to the point that they were would be the middle of 2027 at the best. Good luck at the polling booth in November, Republicans. And that's if it ends today, which, spoiler warning, it ain't ending anytime soon. I don't know how to break this to you guys. I said it yesterday, and I'll say it again today. Iran is really carrying themselves right now like they're ready for the long haul. And I'm not reading it as a bluff. It could be a bluff. I'm not reading it as a bluff. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, you were talking about ordering those stickers for the gas pumps. Can you order a few more so that I have one that says Trump did this with the, pointing at the...
Yeah. When does that start happening? Because I remember a pandemic completely out of everyone's control was Joe Biden's fault. And I remember a war between Russia and Ukraine was Joe Biden's fault, which to a certain extent it was. But that was inexcusable. But now an oil increase directly as a result of a decision made by the sitting president of the United States doesn't seem to be his fault. It's funny how that works. Don't call him dumb, though, Brian. You're going to hurt people's feelings.
Just make sure you order me an extra dozen when
you
get yours. Thanks.
I'm right there with you. Thank you. I don't know how to drag you guys kicking and screaming into the reality of what this man is doing, the efforts that have been made to stop it, so on and so forth. You know what's funny is there is a bill that passed the Senate to the tune of 89-10 in regards to stopping mega corporations from buying homes. And you want to know what a battered talk show host I am? It's like I don't even expect these people to do anything good for us in a bipartisan fashion. I sit there and I'm like, all right. Why did 89 senators actually vote for something that we can all get behind? They're obviously going to pull the rug out from under us at some point here. And I dove into what the bill did. And you know what the bill prevents from happening? You can't have more than 350 homes And if you do have more than 350 ohms, you just create a second business and start buying them under there. That's the bill that passed. It's to make it look like the populist thing happened without doing anything to offend their dear, dear private equity. And that's how you get an 89-10 bill passed, is when you know nothing of actual relevance is getting across the finish line. The costs aren't coming down anytime soon, guys. I did the math for you yesterday. It's going to be $450 on average per household per $10 that every barrel goes up. I've seen speculations that it could go to 200. I don't know how real that is. I'm not buying into that. I am not reporting that as fact. Some people just want attention. I know we'll hit 100 again in the near future. We're definitely going to, if we haven't since I've started talking. I have no idea. It's been an incredibly volatile price. It's $450 per household per $10. We're already up $30. 100 will be $40. That's 4 times $450. It's an $1,800 increase over the course of a year based on the cost of groceries, goods, and gasoline that are going to be coming your way. The cost that it takes to fill your tank really isn't as much of a problem as a lot of people would try and have you believe. It sucks. I'm not saying I want to pay more for it, and I most certainly don't want to pay more for it in the name of enriching Exxon CEOs and the like. But the fact of the matter is, I have a 12-gallon tank, right? I really don't do a lot of driving. Some of you do a lot more. I'm just using my own personal experience. We're right now, gas is 60 cents more expensive than it was pre-Donald Trump's war of choice in Iran. On a 12-gallon tank, that's an extra $7.20 every time you fill up. I fill up about every 10 days or so. What do we talk about? Well, like, what are we talking about here? $7.20 isn't the end of the world. I wouldn't want to take part in that. But if it's the way it has to be, so be it. If there had been some kind of massive horrible storm that took out our infrastructure, if something out of our control took place and we had to pay more at the tank and it totaled $7.20 per fill up, I'd be like, well, this sucks, but like, what are you going to do? Hurricanes happen, whatever the situation is happen, and we're just going to have to suck it up until we can figure out a way to get around it. It's everything else that gets impacted that's going to add up on this. And it's going to add up very quickly. And then there's the conversation of corporate greed. Do you think the party of cutting taxes for billionaires is going to be the party that's going to rein in corporate greed? I've got an answer. I think you guys know what the answer is. What do you guys think? 920-281-1150. Michelle says, I have actually started clapping along when I'm not driving, of course. Another great show, Ben. Thank you very much. Yeah, definitely don't do it driving. But if you're not driving, it's a matter of highlighting the reality. You want to get mad at Democrats with me? Absolutely. But you don't have the shield anymore of Republicans not being in power. Republicans control this puppy, and they're not doing a damn thing to fix it. And quite frankly, they're doing more to upend it. Serious question right now. Lord knows you guys know I don't buy into the concept of trickle-down economics. Something does trickle down on us. It just ain't money. You guys tell me. We just cut taxes for all these people in any industry. All CEOs, all mega multi-billion-dollar corporations, all got massive tax cuts for the second time in as many Trump terms. I'm sure this time we're going to see the windfall any second now. I'm very excited for that. I'm sure it won't get pumped into stock buybacks or CEO bonuses or anything like that. So let me ask you, they're going to receive massive benefits in the way of not paying nearly as much taxes as they had been, right? So that means they realistically don't even have to raise their prices that much because they're already raking in even higher record profits than they were during the Biden administration, and they have the wiggle room in their books in order to absorb those losses, right? Because they're not funneling it into raises. They're not funneling it into better products. They haven't been investing in bettering their services in any way. So they just have the money. They're receiving the money as a result from us. So in other words, it's a government subsidy for the welfare queen billionaires that you guys seem more than happy to point out anytime a mother buys her child a bag of cookies on SNAP benefits. Where are you on this one, guys? They just received a massive tax cut at the hands of Uncle Donnie and the hands of the MAGA Republican billionaire kiss-ass party. Where are we in terms of keeping the prices where they are because they received the benefits from this Republican Party? 920-281-1150. That couldn't mean, no. Does that mean trickle-down economics was one giant lie every single time a Republican did it and people are only just recently waking up to that? That couldn't possibly be the case, right? At least our dad president's telling us that this is actually better, that oil and gas companies are going to charge us more. And I have lost the capacity to think for myself. So it must be true. Phil sent me a picture of the sticker. I actually found that one as well. I was trying to find a way to send that to people. It's a picture of Bibi Netanyahu, Donald Trump, and the ghost of Jeffrey Epstein all pointing, and it says, "We did that." In the name of oil and gas prices. Ernie says Dave Ramsey got a solution for the minimum wage. Get a second job. Yeah, anytime I talk crap on Dave Ramsey, Ernie, that's when I get the most hates that I ever get on this show. You know what I mean? People, for the record, he does have, like, in terms of getting out of debt, yes, that's obviously the right move, but getting out of debt's a little bit easier when you were born into the welfare generation like Dave Ramsey was, as opposed to the millennials like we are. Joe says, yesterday I saw Trump answering questions and he just doesn't have I have no idea what you're saying here, man. To confidently answer any kind of wartime question while trying to say that it's a conflict. Oh, yeah, what was it? He said it was an excursion when he meant to say that it was an incursion. Meanwhile, it's obviously already spiraling into full-blown war territory. My favorite one, Joe, is when he says, this war will end when I want it to end. Like, just imagine. At one point, he said, we started this because of a feeling that I had that Iran was going to attack. Picture a woman president saying that we started a war because of a feeling that she had. You tell me what the reaction from the MAGA right would be had Kamala Harris said, I started a war on a feeling. Would it be, oh, thank goodness she had that kind of intestinal fortitude to stop this 47-year-old war that you never heard me talk about until I heard Fox News say it a whole bunch of times? You think they would be approaching it that way, or do you think there might be a different attitude towards this? I don't know. I'm not a fortune teller, except for I absolutely do know, and they wouldn't have reacted that way. Come on now. We have to squeeze another break in here, guys. It's that 10 o'clock hour on a Friday. You guys know me at this point. Sometimes it gets a little off the rails, but we got to get this one in here. 920-281-1150. Check us out on YouTube. You can find me. I have the link up on my Facebook page right now. You can just follow that. Please click the subscribe button while you're there. It's at Ben Cominos if you want to search it in the search bar. All one word, and you need that @ sign to do it. But every subscription helps as we're trying to get this thing off the ground here a little bit. It will be on the HBY Facebook page soon enough too. This is kind of a practice phase right now, but may as well capitalize while we're doing this, right? And of course, there will be a rebroadcast on Political Voices Network at 1 p.m. Central Time with a lot more bells and whistles than what you're getting here during the live program as well. Feel free to check that out too. We have to get to break. We'll keep this conversation rolling on the other side. Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. All right, we've returned. Outside the Box, Ben Cominos. I received a call shortly before we were getting back from break. I had to put some finishing touches on things here. Don't know who's here, but we'll find out what's happening. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, good morning, Ben.
Hey, Carlos. Yeah, what's happening, man?
I am prepared for Snowmageddon.
Oh,
the
God.
Apocalypse of Arctic blasts are upon us. And no one freak out. Everyone hunker down.
Yeah.
How's
right.
that sound?
Yeah, no, sounds about right. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, we'll see what we get. Just wanted to make this point with, actually have some family traveling on Sunday, meaning airport-wise. And now you throw in Snowmageddon with the TSA situation and all the hijinks of Congress. And from my nonpartisan take on this issue, I'm just going to say this calmly, politely. Do not be confused that I would not be ready to literally terminate every one of these people, not physically, meaning
Yes.
professionally,
occupationally,
fire
of course.
every single one of them,
Right.
every one of them, and no quarter. I don't want a syllable out of any of their disgusting mouths. Congress doing their job as public servants stewards of the public trust that they've been elected and entrusted with, should be passing a budget, not a continuing resolution. I liken this to having a paper due for my professor, and as opposed to giving him the paper, I tell him, you know what, I'm just going to give you a few bullet points of what I plan to do, and let's call that good. That is what the CR is to the budget. And then I would have the audacity to sit there and say, give me an A. And that professor, if they had any backbone whatsoever, would utterly reject it. I would get the grade I deserved, which is an F for fools. And there you go. And if it were when I was in graduate school, then I'm done.
Yeah.
Because C's are failing in grad school, not B's.
I get what you're saying, and moreover, Carlos, the way they play politics with this kind of thing, because you see them, it's the whataboutism, right? Because right now you're standing there with a Republican trifecta, and they're trying to say it's because Democrats won't play ball. And so what's their response? Not to try and find a path forward, but to show tweets of Jim Jordan saying Democrats have a trifecta. Any shutdown is on them. It's a matter of all politics boils down to, in my opinion, in 2026 is trying to figure out a way to get the bulk of the blame to fall on the party that isn't yours. And however you get there, that's how we'll get there. And you got these people spinning Ben, circles. Go ahead.
Ben, I'm sorry. I guess I didn't make myself clear. I don't have a fornication about any of that. Do your job or be fired.
Oh, yeah. No,
simple. I don't know. Not a word. Not a word. I don't care. Don't tell me about your dog's grandmother's ex-neighbor's best friend's gout that caused you to not get into Congress to sign the bill. You're fired. Go away.
I'm right there with you, man. I love the attitude. Brian out in Fremont's right there along with you, and I appreciate the call. I think he's spot on with his assessment. And, like, everybody's hands are dirty in this matter. And at the end of the day, it is people working in TSA. We had, I believe it was Kathy yesterday, who texted the show and said, can they hire part-time retired employees to work at TSA to kind of bolster things along here because people are struggling so much. And I loved her attitude towards that, but I get it. And he's not the only one that feels that way. And Brian's saying, I wonder how many people feel like that if we could fire all members of Congress on both sides. I mean, I think that's what January 6th was all about. I'm joking. Don't come at me for that one. But yeah, I think there are a lot of people that feel that way. And what's funny is, and it's what keeps percolating through this show, is I will highlight around the country candidates who are actually running for something outside of the duopoly. And every time one of those candidates come about, you watch the entire media infrastructure and both political parties try to stomp them out. I don't care if you're in favor of Zohran Mamdani's policies or not. He sure as hell ain't a liberal, and he's definitely not a conservative. I don't care what you think about Graham Plattner. He's not a liberal, and he's definitely not a conservative. They address the fact that we shouldn't be sending money overseas. We shouldn't be doing war. We should be creating programs that facilitate the growth of the American middle class. That's all you have to do and say. I think that's the most frustrating part about how bad MAGA is at this job is Democrats are going to beat their brains in politically in November. It's not even going to be close. Like, it's going to be ugly. There was a state Senate race in New Hampshire earlier this week that went Trump +9 in 2024 that the Democrat won on Tuesday. It's going to be ugly come November. Not because the Democrats have ideas, not because they have all of these great improvements compared to what they were from 2021 through 2025, but because, much like I oftentimes highlight for you, one party's about maintaining the status quo, one party's about making life objectively worse. We're currently living through the making life objectively worse part. So you know what's going to look really good? A status quo that really wasn't working for a lot of people. And they're going to end up returning. That's how this system is able to perpetuate itself. I don't want it to sound like I'm saying if all the Republicans in Congress were gone, it would be easier to wean out the obviously trash candidates. But to a certain extent, I am saying that. Because when one party is saying, We're going to continue funneling an ever larger amount of money into college tuition and Obamacare subsidies. And the other party is saying we're going to remove those subsidies and a bunch of you are going to lose access to health care and college education. People are going to vote for the increase the subsidies more and more because you don't feel it as much, even though we all know that that is only contributing further, to an ever-escalating price crisis that we've been dealing with, and the consolidation of wealth that we oftentimes highlight here. But when the other option is, what if we cut taxes for billionaires, start another forever war, and eliminate all social programs that benefit the working class? Guess where people are going to gravitate towards, guys? I'll give you two guesses. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Morning, Ben. Jerry from Appleton.
What's up, Jerry?
You brought up one of my pet topics, so I have to comment. Just to remind some of your listeners, I'm originally from New York. I go back as often as I can. Lived there for 9 years. Didn't own a car. Used mass transit pretty much all the time. So I know the New York mass transit system really well, subways and buses. So when Mamdani first proposed free buses, I said to myself, well, before I come to an opinion, I'm going to do what Ben does. I'm going to look into this and see whether it has any merit or not. And it turns out it has a lot more merit than meets the eye. First of all, free buses, either citywide or partial, have already been implemented in a number of cities throughout the world, particularly in Europe, which comes as no great surprise. Second of all, mass transit in New York City is already very heavily subsidized. So free buses, quote unquote, you're talking about an increase in a subsidy, not kind of creating a new budget item, so to speak. Third, you wouldn't have to have it citywide. You could target it to the routes where it's most needed. And by the way, the people that use the buses are working class people, most of whom are going to work and going to school. So I'm not saying I support it or I don't, but what I am saying is look into the facts, learn a little bit, and you'll realize a lot of things that might seem crazy really aren't.
Yeah, I love that sentiment, and I appreciate the insight as well as the compliment, and I think that's the appropriate way to handle all of these kind of things. But I appreciate the info for sure. You have a good weekend and try and avoid the blizzard that's apparently impending. All right.
So you can't avoid it. My strategy is to snow blow approximately every 5 to 6 inches.
Okay, there we go. I can dig that. I can get behind that. You take it easy. Have a good weekend. I'm right there with you. Tina says, what if outside the box people are in the minority and the majority of people want this Trump craziness? Well, Tina, you teed me up, and I think that's going to be the perfect way to wrap this show up. The White House shared a poll specifically addressing that issue, and then very quickly deleted it because it showed staunch support for what was going on, specifically from one voting bloc and no others. We're going to talk about what that looks like on the other side of the break. You'd think Tina's on the payroll. I love you for that. We'll do that on the other side before we end up calling it a week here, guys. Stay tuned. I'll take a couple more texts, and we'll check that YouTube chat line as well, see what's going on there, too. Lots of new sources to try and keep the info straight here. We shall return. Outside the Box, Ben Cominos, WHBY, Political Voices. All right. Sheila says, Ben, Jerry forgot to mention that the bus will run the route regardless of free or payment. I really wanted the opportunity to tag on anything that Jerry comments on. For sure. Yeah, you're absolutely right with that as well. I appreciate the comment, Sheila. So let me, we have just over 6 minutes here to get this point across, and I really want to. So Caroline Leavitt shared online, that being the press secretary for Donald Trump. ABC News posted a graphic along with a story. The graphic saying FBI warns police in California that Iran wants to retaliate for U.S. attacks by launching drones against the West Coast, according to an alert reviewed by ABC News. Caroline Leavitt reshared that with the comment that goes as follows. This post and story should be immediately retracted by ABC News for providing false information to intentionally alarm the American people. They wrote this based on one email that was sent to local law enforcement in California about a single unverified tip. The email even states the tip was based on unverified intelligence, yet ABC News left out the critical fact in their story. Why? To be clear, no such threat from Iran to our homeland exists, and it never did. So first of all, kudos to her, because I do believe that ABC News was being sensationalist about what they were reporting there. But more importantly, if no such threat from Iran to our homeland exists and it never did, then why the hell are we even doing this? Because I was told that we were distinctly in danger of what Iran was going to do if we did not intervene. Are you starting to recognize the games that are being played? I'm willing to bet if you're an outside the box member, you are. But Jerry, but but outside of that, I'm beginning to think that you may not be as likely to be acknowledging what it is that Caroline Leavitt had to say there. Now, if you are just joining us, Tina had mentioned, what if the outside the box people are in the minority and the majority of people want this Trump craziness? Allow me to highlight emphatically why that is exactly not the case. Because at the end of the day, both MAGA and Blue MAGA do not have enough voters to tip the scales. Ultimately, what decides every election is the way that the people that are independent find themselves voting, and whether or not they're voting on they're coming to trans our kids or they're coming on no more forever wars in the Middle East. That will ultimately determine the way that the scales tip, at least on the presidential side. On the congressional side, non-statewide, obviously, but in the House, maybe it's a little bit more cut and dry than that, because most states are gerrymandered to hell and back at this point. But in terms of national as well as statewide politics, that's what ultimately tips it in a lot of states, are those independent voters. As I mentioned, the White House shared 3 separate polls, one from NBC, one from CNN, one from YouGov. And they wanted to use it to show you, highlight exactly how lying that liberal media is. Even with the quotes saying, in quotes, MAGA is splintering on Iran only because Tucker, Candace, Steve Bannon, and Megyn Kelly say they are. Meanwhile, the polls. And it shows the polls, and they were shared by the White House. So this got immense coverage. It got huge views as a result of the White House sharing it before ultimately deleting that they had shared it. Why did they delete it? Well, let's take a look at that, shall we? Amongst MAGA Republicans, NBC, CNN, and YouGov in that order, 90%, 88%, 85%. So that means somewhere between 17 and 18 out of 20 people that voted for Donald Trump are sheep. They are the people that said they were voting to end the forever wars, but because the dad president said so, we are now in favor of forever wars, leaving about 2 or 3 people to actually be thinking for themselves out of every 20. That was the point they thought they were making. They were like, there's no fracture within MAGA. What are you talking about? They do exactly what we tell them to do. Thinking for themselves is not allowed in this movement. Here's the problem with that. As soon as you go to independents and liberals and all adults in general, those numbers all of a sudden don't become too favorable. Again, NBC, CNN, YouGov. Independents are at 27%, 32%, 24%. Democrats are at 9%, 18%, 11%. All adults is what really sticks out to me, though. 41%, 41%, 37%. You're barely getting 4 in 10 Americans to agree with, as Tina identifies it, the craziness that is represented by the MAGA movement. Because that's not what people voted for. That's not what people expected. And sure as hell isn't what the independents were hoping for when they chose to vote Republican instead of Democratic. They're coming their trans to kids away, MAGA. They're not going to question what's happening. But for the people that are actually not beholden to a political party, for the people that are thinking for themselves, for the people that recognize that a 5-layer bean burrito should not be 6 timesing their price over the course of 17 years, despite the fact that there really isn't that much of an increase in the cost to make one. They are expecting something better out of their elected officials rather than tax cuts for billionaires and another pointless war that nobody in the administration can really describe how we even ended up there. Every set of data that you are looking at shows that nobody is marching to Donald Trump's fight outside of MAGA, which only comprises about 27 to 30% of the population. Nobody wants this. And as has been highlighted on statewide elections, as well as random state senator and state assembly elections all across this state, Republicans have snuck a couple out of there still, but you're watching places that went +9, +12, +15, Donald Trump all of a sudden swing Democratic because people feel abandoned. There are people, and trust me, I lived it, right? I talk about it all the time. In an election year, I had to struggle with the fact that I grew to realize that blue MAGA liberals are not anti-war. And I knew Republican Party wasn't. And I found myself wondering, where do I turn if I want to see the party that actually isn't going to do this kind of stuff? America's more sane than you guys realize. The media wants you to believe it's not. That's why I started this show, to break through the noise, and we'll do it 2.5 hours at a time here. And with that, download the WHBY app. Check me out on YouTube. It's at Ben Cominos. I have a TikTok now. Maybe give that a whack. I'm Ben Cominos with a space. Plenty of ways to find me and keep up with me when I'm not on the air. I hate selling this as much as you guys hearing it, but this is the kind of crap I have to do now in this industry. No one's making me. I just have to do it. I have to go. Have a good weekend. Everybody stay safe from the snow, and we'll be back on Monday to break down whatever happens. Haley's up next, Outside the Box.